Gwart Show is sponsored by Ellipsis Labs. Ellipsis Labs is building Atlas, the blockchain purpose-built for verifiable finance. You may know of Ellipsis Labs by their first product, Phoenix, a fully on-chain order book DEX that's done over $50 billion in unincentivized volume. This is one of the strongest teams I know in crypto. If you're interested in working for a mission-driven company, Ellipsis Labs is hiring engineers who are passionate about crypto and finance to work on Atlas. You can learn more and apply on Ellipsis Labs Twitter, @ellipsis_labs. Don't forget to check out Atlas too, @AtlasXYZ on Twitter.
All right, welcome, guys. Today we have on a very special guest, the founder of Starkware, building Starknet, Eli Ben-Sasson. Most of you guys are probably familiar with him. Welcome, Eli. You can feel free to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Gwart. Very honored to be on this illustrious show. My name is Eli Ben-Sasson. I am a co-founder and CEO of Starkware. We're around 200 team size, and the company probably one of the largest that is focusing solely on building a blockchain infrastructure.
Awesome, yeah. And we don't have to go too far into Starkware, Starknet. I think mostly people are familiar, so we can try to make this conversation a little bit more interesting than what you may have done when you had to introduce Starkware as a whole. So to that end, what is Starkware working on right now? Obviously, you have an Ethereum L2, but you have been doing a lot of research on the Bitcoin side. I'm interested where you guys are kind of focusing your time and resources.
Yeah, so we have two products. The first one called StarkX. It's the settlement engine, probably one of the very first Validity L2s or ZK L2s on top of Ethereum. It was the settlement engine behind the DYDX V3 that is, as of last month, been completely shut down. Also behind projects like Sorare and Immutable. So that's one product that we have. The other product that we have more recent is Starknet, which is a Validity Rollup based on ZK Stark proofs. Stark proofs without ZK. That's the second thing we have. And indeed, we are very much, in terms of research, there are two notable research things that we're very proud of. One is, and they're somewhat related. One is Bitcoin research and advancing, exploring OpCat and what you can do with it in terms of covenants and having Starknet settle also onto Bitcoin. And related to that, you probably want a Stark verifier that could be Bitcoin friendly. And that turns out to be STU, which stands for Stark2. That's our second generation verifier and prover that we're building. It's the most scalable, fastest prover out there today. And it works with very small numbers, which means that those numbers are small enough for Bitcoin to be able to process and verify a Stark proof. So Bitcoin research, next generation Stark proving research, those are two things we're focusing on.
Yeah, I know you guys, I probably only know this from Eric Wall, but I know you guys have always been like sort of Bitcoin friendly. But when you launched Starknet, was the goal always to do a lot of research on the Bitcoin side, or did you? I guess I obviously knew you initially as launching an Ethereum L2. What was there any transition from working on primarily an Ethereum L2 to now doing more of this Bitcoin research stuff, or has this always been the goal all along? I'm just kind of curious about like the timeline and if you guys have shifted like your mission statement, if you will, thus far.
It's always been our dream. And this goes back to, so how did I get into crypto? I was a professor of math and theoretical computer science, and I was doing theoretical research on things such as Starks and Snarks. I was also one of the founders of Zcash, which is based on research we did. So the starting point of my journey into crypto was when I was peddling my research among mostly academic institutions. But I heard that there's a conference of Bitcoin in San Jose in 2013. And I asked Gavin Andreessen, he was the head of the Bitcoin Association at the time, to speak there. And he said, yeah, sure, come over. It had a lot of support from like Bitcoin OGs at the time, Greg Maxwell and Mike Hearn. So I gave this talk. I remember I was just giving a talk at Stanford and then another one scheduled for Berkeley. And I came into the Bitcoin conference and I was just blown away with the energy and, this sort of Woodstock kind of feeling of we're now changing history for the better. And then I gave a talk And not that many people attended it, but many of those OGs did attend it. And when I got off the podium, they came up and asked very different questions from what the academics were asking. The academics were sort of not really asking any questions, or like, I know they were asking behind my back, like, why is this weird professor trying to implement these things in practice? But the Bitcoiners, Greg Maxwell, Mike Kern, were asking, okay, where's the code? I said, why do you need the code? They said, oh, here are like 5 things we're going to do with it tomorrow. And I tried to convince them, really? You don't really mean this? They said, hell yes, we mean this. We need this now. So that was for me the red pilling moment, the moment that I felt very deep inside that I fell in love with something and started my journey towards crypto. So for me, deploying something on Bitcoin has always been a long-term dream. And for all of Starkware, all of us are like, very, very much in love with Bitcoin. The only small minor issue is that Bitcoin, is very conservative. And it's a bit hard to deploy things like a Stark verifier on it. But now that there's an opportunity, sure, we'd love to do it.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting you bring up Greg Maxwell, who has sort of obviously considered one of the preeminent figures in Bitcoin, but has sort of faded for legal reasons as well, but has sort of faded a little bit out of Bitcoin development. But this was a long time ago. Why do you think that Bitcoin sort of stagnated or went a different direction, right? Like we saw the emergence of Lightning. There's obviously been a lot of, proponents and then also sort of critics of Lightning. But like what you mentioned, Gavin Andresen was still in charge. This was quite a long time ago. Where was the stagnation? And what kind of like, why didn't the Bitcoin community rally around some of the ideas that you were putting forth at the time?
Well, they did rally around, but I think ultimately it goes back to governance. And there's this very brief moment in time when communities can sort of agree around some sort of constitution or some founding principles. And Bitcoin, when that time was around, I guess just didn't quite have the time to deal with it or didn't want to deal with it. For historical reasons, part of the fact that Satoshi was both pseudonymous and then disappeared probably was a big part of that. But I would say that like across all of crypto, there's a huge unsolved problem, which is how do you get decentralized governance right? And I think the issues that you see in Bitcoin, in Ethereum, in other places are all stemming from this thing that we have this unsolved problem of decentralized governance. So Bitcoin has one solution, which is basically to stall. I think pretty much stall, or like you need this very, very wide consensus that it's not even clear how you go about getting it. And Ethereum has a different model, which is a BDFL and some opaque. like a set of people who are close to the BDFL, but I think it's also not ideal. And I do hope that when the time comes, things in Starknet will do a little bit better. But I can't say that by now that we have. So it's an open question how to do governance right.
Yeah, and so to that end, I guess you kind of looked at Ethereum and saw it as the sandbox upon which to build, at least for the time being. But I think that it seems Starkware, the company at large, is fairly chain agnostic then insofar as, where you guys are looking to build. What is your and I'll dig in more, but like kind of what is your overarching view now of having built on Ethereum, launched an L2? Like what are your thoughts now, having been live for a couple years now? And go ahead.
Our vision has not changed since day one. It goes something like this. So what we brought to the table is scaling blockchains with validity proofs, and in particular with Stark proofs that are post-quantum secure, no trusted setup, fastest to scale. The interesting thing is that when we came out, the company was probably, I'm pretty sure, the first company to be founded to go at scaling blockchains with validity proof technology. We were founded late 2017. And It's something like this. I'm sure that our technology is going to be the gold standard, like using Starks and Fry, all kinds of math terms I don't want to, bore the listeners with, but things that are just better from a mathematical and engineering point of view. It's very clear that this will be the gold standard. And that's actually already the case. If you look at all scaling solutions right now, not all, but pretty much nearly all of them, the ones that have faster proving time and settlement times, all of them are using this very technology that, I co-invented. And I'm very proud of that. At the same time, proving technology will be commoditized, period. Like it's just going to be a bunch of software that everyone can use. So now the question is, as a technology company who's innovating and whose forte is exactly on this proving technology, how do you go about productizing it and where do you put it out first? So ultimately, any blockchain that's going to scale, Solana, Sui, Ethereum, doesn't really matter, is going to be using this kind of ZK proofs, ZK Starks. I have no doubt about that they make a lot of sense for privacy, for scalability. They're going to be used. For us, we asked ourselves, okay, where can we deploy this fastest time to deploy and with the most impact? And the answer was clear at the time. It was Ethereum. I think it still is Ethereum. It may soon also include Bitcoin. So that was it. We were just very practical. We asked ourselves, where's the best place to deploy it? We can only do one thing as a startup. That one thing will be to deploy it on Ethereum. So we're very happy with that decision. Now that Bitcoin may be an option, yeah, sure, we'd like to do that as well. But down the line, other places as well, for sure.
Thanks for listening to The Gwart Show on the Blockspace Podcast Network. Subscribe to our newsletter at blockspace.media to get the show directly to your inbox. Show links, transcripts, and Bitcoin articles twice per week. Stay ahead of the conversation by visiting blockspace.media.
Yeah. Okay. You said you weren't going to bore us with too much technical math stuff, so I'm going to try to keep this also not boring with too much technical math stuff. But can you just explain to me and then listeners as well, why, like maybe some of the technical differences and how you guys have gone about building a ZK rollup. So for example, you guys, I don't know if it was you or your team, but you guys wrote essentially a new language, right? Cairo for, okay. So like talk me through maybe like what distinguishes ZK rollups and in your mind, like why, Starknet's going to be the gold standard.
With your permission, I'm going to call them validity rollups just because ZK talks about privacy and none of them offer privacy. Yeah,
that's fine.
Today. So, but when I say validity rollups, it's okay if people think about ZK rollups, which is the incorrect term, but used by everyone. So the way these rollups work if you think about blockchains generally, they are a technology to deliver integrity. Integrity means knowing that the right thing is being done, even when you're not watching. And if you have integrity, then you can start basing very important things like, money or systems of value, because, you have software that is doing the right thing even when you're not watching. So in particular, let's say your funds are not seized. Okay, so that's how blockchains work. Blockchains deliver integrity, and they deliver integrity by asking everyone and inviting everyone to join this transparent system where everyone checks everything. And it works beautifully. And there are, of course, economic incentives to miners and stakers and so on to make the whole thing work. And everyone believes that it works. That's great. But now, what if someone has a big computer and wants to offer computation and, offer some services? How do we trust the integrity of that thing? Well, that's where these validity rollups and proof systems come in, because they have, or what we invented is basically a way for integrity to be proved mathematically. And to be proved mathematically, even when you're not running the system and you're not inspecting what I'm doing. So that's exactly what Starks deliver and have delivered first, in the StarkX systems, right? This thing that allows everyone, or let's say a smart contract on Ethereum, to know that the right thing was being done, let's say with DYDX transactions, even if Ethereum didn't need to inspect and check each and every one of them. Okay, so that's how you get essentially scale for integrity. Instead of asking everyone to check each and every transaction, as you do on an L1, and as you actually need to pretty much do in an optimistic rollup, right? Or you need to trust some big node that you don't even know what it is to do it. With a validity rollup, you can still run, let's say, an Ethereum node or someday a Bitcoin node, only trust that very simple computation. But because that simple computation is checking these Stark proofs, you actually get integrity for this massive amount of computation that you don't get to see. So that's basically how all of these Validity Rollups or ZK Rollups work. It's kind of magical, but it's actually math.
Yeah. Okay. So can you explain to me the difference? There's other teams now working like Risk Zero and Succinct. They're doing something a little bit different. Can you distinguish what Starknet's doing versus what these kind of like marketplace of provers or whatever? What are the differences or the key differences in layman's language, if you will?
Yeah, so let me start by saying the similarity. All of these systems are using pretty much Starks to do, and some of them even ZK Starks to basically. So it's, again, this technology that, my co-authors and I wrote the white papers for, and we deployed first. So, and I'm actually, as I said, I'm extremely happy that this has become the gold standard. Even if some may view some of these teams as our competitors, I think very highly of all the teams that work in this space. So that's the similarity. Now, the question is, what are you proving? To best of my knowledge, the approach that these two teams you mentioned are taking is to say, we are going to prove a virtual machine that is a generic CPU, CPU. So if you want, for instance, to argue about blockchain stuff, be it Solana or Bitcoin or Ethereum, well, please compile your code into something that at the end of the day runs on that virtual machine, let's say an x86, or most often it's a RISC-V processor. And we're going to prove that RISC-V processor. So it's a little bit like, if you take Solana, take your Solana code, compile it into Rust, compile the Rust into RISC-V, execute the RISC-V, prove that RISC-V execution has been correct. Okay? That's the approach taken by some of these teams, which, let's say, what are the pros and cons? The pros are that as a programmer, let's say any RISC program or any C program or any Python program could just be compiled. The cons are that the overhead compared to something that more directly compiles into a virtual machine, be it EVM or SVM or in our case, Cairo VM, you're going to get these very big overheads. And another issue is that actually in terms of things called soundness and completeness, the fact that you generated a proof, does it mean that you have integrity? It gets much trickier because you have all of these middle steps that you also need to worry about, all these compilers. So what exactly is in the interpretation of the instruction set that you're executing, and how are you executing it? And these are things that you don't have when you work, let's say, with an EVM, with Ethereum virtual machine. Yeah.
When you say overhead, what do you mean? Are you talking about like specialized hardware, proving hardware there?
No, there's a very simple metric that measures proof systems, and it is the number of field elements. You could think of each field element as a number. So you take basically your computation and you encode it using a whole bunch of numbers. The question is, how many numbers and how big are they? So when I talk about inefficiency, it means that for a certain computation, you're going to need to encode it with a lot of numbers, which is going to then lead to very, very long and complicated computation that is also not so, well, you have to worry more about its soundness, auditing, and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. So quick side note. I don't know how relevant this is, but I was just curious. What do you think about the hardware aspect of this? I don't know if this is relevant to Starkware, but in terms of just, proving in general, right? There's I've seen teams that are now, building specialized hardware for this. Do you think that this is the future? And what are the ramifications of this? Is it good that I've seen some teams return to, ASIC type machines, which is maybe a little bit ironic, with Bitcoin mining and a lot of the kind of reservation about energy consumption there. And if we have a ton of these, proving specific hardware, I don't know. What are your thoughts on the kind of trajectory of that?
So I have no doubt that there will be a proving hardware that's dedicated to proving. It's really only the question of what exactly are the proving parameters, like the exact mathematical and engineering parameters of the proof system. And I think those are not yet set in stone. So that matters a lot. And related to that, the question of market demand and when is the right time to go at it. So I definitely think that right now it's too early to market. And, since we've founded Starkware, there have been so many teams that came to us and, VCs asking for our advice, should we invest, or is this the right time to start, investing and working on ZK hardware? My answer is still, it is too early. I don't think that now is the right time to start working on ZK hardware. It will be sometime in the future. But when you think about hardware, you want something that, let's say, 1 to 2 years out, you're pretty sure that there are going to be, let's say, 100,000 machines that are going to want this thing, right? That's the scale you need. I don't think we're right now at a point where in 2 years you're certain or very confident that there'll be 100,000 machines that need really high performance proving. I may be wrong, but that's my position. Maybe in 4 years or maybe like in 2 years would be a good time to start with it, but I still think that we're too early, and I advise teams or investors looking into this. I think it's we're not yet there in terms of the needs for dedicated ZK hardware.
Yeah. Okay. A little bit different direction now. There obviously has been a lot of discussion about the rollup centric roadmap recently. Overarching thoughts, and then I'll pry more. But what do you think of Ethereum's rollup centric roadmap? How has it gone thus far? You guys are a rollup yourself. What are your thoughts?
It's way too early to say. It certainly it benefited the rollups. I think to a large extent the rollup-centric is probably a little bit more optimistic rollup-centric roadmap, because a lot of the steps taken, I think Max Resnick spoke a lot about this. Like, it wasn't like the steps taken by Ethereum weren't, agnostic to which rollups benefit from it. It was mostly when thinking about designing, was really the optimistic rollups. And I think, a different approach could have been or can be now taking a more, validity rollup first approach, which would have led to different design directions. But, Ethereum has its own process for making its decisions. Now, the big question of whether this is overall good or bad for Ethereum, I don't know. I actually don't know. I mean, I'm curious. Do you have any thought on that? Like, do you know if it's good or bad? Like, do we know?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask you this with regards to Bitcoin in a bit, so be prepared. But, I probably have very similar thoughts to, a lot of the reservations that people have brought up, I think, are functionally true. I mean, liquidity fragmentation, mindshare fragmentation, the politicking, I think, is there. When you say that Ethereum took a somewhat of a preference toward optimistic rollups, do you think that this has been a net negative, or it's just sort of been what was ready in the time being? Also, and I'll add one other question. What do you think of the notion that these optimistic rollups are going to kind of launch as optimistic rollups and then eventually become ZK rollups? What are your thoughts there?
So again, I can't say if it's been, I don't know the alternative history, like what would have happened if some other route would have been taken. I don't know. It's hard to say. As a CEO of a team, we're like practical and ask ourselves, within the constraints given, how do we navigate our way and make the best of it? So I don't know. Certainly, we're very happy with whatever is afforded to us on Ethereum, and we're making good use of it. What about like the optimistic rollups turning into ZK rollups? Well, it goes back to this question of efficiency. I mean, what is the goal? If the goal is to what amount of scale do you want to offer on top of Ethereum, and what amount of scale is sufficient? Well, we postulate, and that's why Cairo was built. That a little bit like, if you want to use GPUs really and max out their capabilities, you're going to write the major parts in CUDA. Why? Because that's the language that will give you like really high usage of this new thing, a GPU. So with Starks, it's very similar. At the end of the day, the overleading factor is like this Stark proving cost. And we believe that if you go with a Stark-friendly or a ZK-friendly virtual machine and a programming language around that, the analog of CUDA, but where the virtual machine or the silica in the end is not like a GPU, but rather think of it as some Stark proving system. We think that you'll get much higher scale and performance. This certainly is displayed already by the numbers and performance that we have on Starknet, and the things that are going to unfold, when Stu comes along. So I think there's probably going to be 100x degradation if you stick to EVM. And there's probably going to be another 100x degradation on top of that if you also compile that EVM through a bunch of other things, like ending up in, RISC-V. So I think, you'll end up with, let's say, 1,000 to 10,000x degradation in the overall proving capabilities by going fully from, let's say, Solidity, like not changing anything about Solidity and EVM, and then passing it through something like, Reth or some other Rust system or C system into RISC-V and proving that. So it will work. It probably works already today, but I don't think that's the way you'll get maximum scale or global
that makes
scale.
sense. It's like Cairo being more purpose-built makes sense. It's just maybe this hasn't kind of been realized by the market yet, or there's not the demand yet by the market for this. Do you think that the Ethereum community has embraced Starknet? Like, if you just had to kind of respond to that with your own personal opinion.
No, most certainly not. No.
Why is that, do you think?
Probably cultural reasons or something. I don't know. Like, you have to be like. There's a lot of tribalism and community, and it's a good thing overall. But like, it really helps if you're part of the tribe and you. But I think something about us was never. There was this meme once that where Starknet is unaligned or the unaligned, and we do lean into that because there's something like we do say we think sort of we proudly follow the tech and we understand the math and the tech very well and we deliver very well on it, and that's how things like Cairo and Validium and a whole bunch of other things came around. That, by the way, the interesting thing is that with time they are all embraced by the Ethereum community. But I think that's the explanation. But whatever, I think it's very important that you walk your own way and do the things you really believe in. And that's what we did.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Also, I was wondering if you thought that your openness to Bitcoin, and maybe, like I said, I knew about you guys from Eric Wall, obviously, who's kind of long term had this vision to, like, his grandiose idea has been to bring ZK rollups, or at least he's talked about it much more than most Bitcoiners, right? And so he's been like aligned with you guys. And I was wondering if you felt that the Ethereum community kind of rejected as a result of not being fully on board in the same way that Optimism or Arbitrum really appeared to embrace like ETH and ETH the asset and the kind of vision there.
Well, like historically, I think it was the other way around, but I don't think it would have mattered. Like, even if we would have had the biggest embrace from Ethereum, and of course, in the early days, we had a huge amount of embracing. So the very first investment that Vitalik made, to the best of my knowledge, was basically in Starkware. And the very important project that we did, the very first thing, was basically a grant that we received from the Ethereum Foundation, the largest at the time, to build open source Stark prover and verifier. So there was a time that we were deeply aligned and loved by, I think, Ethereum. I don't know exactly when or what happened. Honestly, I don't exactly know what exactly led to this discontent on their side. I think it was more one-sided. Like, we weren't unhappy with them. We were very happy to build something like StarkX. Maybe there was some anticipation that we will just continue receiving grants and doing projects that are just going to scale Ethereum and not think about things like revenues and products for our company. I don't know. But I just want to say, going back to these very first principles that say the technology of Starks is going to be adopted everywhere, and it's going to permeate outside of blockchain to the whole financial system. Like, it's a much better way in which, basically, instead of assuming integrity is always demonstrated and asserted by the public, and it is done so using math. It's just a much better way. So there'll be a day when banks and nation states are going to demand that people prove what they're doing with and the technology they're going to use is ZK Starks. So it was clear to me from the start that it's not going to end just by scaling Ethereum. We would have again, we will happily try to scale Bitcoin, and tomorrow, if we can, we'll try to scale Solana, and someday we'll try to scale whatever CBDCs if there's a need for it, and anything and any place that this stuff is needed. I think we'll try to go there. It's only just the focus is very limited. What one company can do at a single time is very limited.
Yeah, I do believe you when you say you're not exactly sure. I've listened to a number of your podcasts, and I think you're being honest when you say you're not sure exactly if what happened in terms of some, I don't know, misalignment with Ethereum or whatever it may be. And I also think maybe you're a professor and you probably come at this very much from an academic and technical background, and maybe have just spent less time in the cultural aspects, and you're very focused on the math. And I think that does play a role probably, right? Like you're trying to build something that you think is the future of the tech, and maybe that hasn't resonated with, I don't know, some of
there was a lot of respect always for the math. It's just the respect for the math didn't translate as much into recognition for the mathematicians or the teams that actually made it happen about. And I will say that this still is ongoing to this day. Like the amount of willingness to recognize the pivotal role that Starkware has played in this thing being the standard is not in line with reality. But at the end of the day, we're going to keep on building and trying to build the very best thing that we can. That's what's important, not the perception or the where we lie in the place of certain people.
You guys got a lot of pushback on the initial airdrop. What have you felt that? So it's been a while. So I listened to your podcast with Laura Shin right after that, right? And yeah, I mean it seems to be like many such cases. So if it makes you feel any better, I haven't seen many airdrops, right, that have really made the Ethereum community enlightened. Like I guess most recently there was this Hyperliquid airdrop, but how much that is actually related to Ethereum is unclear. I'm not sure how aligned Hyperliquid is with Ethereum, which is fine. They built a great product, but the reality is that they did a great airdrop, but I don't know how much it has to do with Ethereum. So, but in any case, it's been a while now, 10 months now since your airdrop. Like, have you felt that there's been ongoing fallout from that, or have I guess what has your perception been since then? I have to ask you this, of course, Yeah,
of course. I think it's a terrific question. And okay. Yeah, it was quite an experience. Let's put it this way. So building up towards it, we knew that we have no fucking idea how to get this right? And we try, like, you're basically, I mean, what is the issue? And I wrote a blog about this. I can, share about like reflections on like what happened. Really what you want to do is you want tokens to be allocated in the hands of those who have done and will do, of the individuals, of the people, of the persons who are most likely, who have done the most and are most likely to care most about the ongoing operation of the system. The problem is, and this is a problem across all of blockchains, there is no association between persons and things, any other metric, right? And then you're already in a world of like trying to approximate. And then to make things worse, we all know that there are certain entities, and I actually don't know, like, I don't know enough about them. Like, is it one entity, 5, like, that are in the business of airdrop farming, and right? So they do a whole bunch of strategies. And so even when you think about like community, sure, we felt very strongly, I felt very strongly this huge wave and storm of anger directed at me, directed at Starkware, a bunch of other people who were working very hard, coming from, I don't know exactly who, because like, yeah, you see people usually with very few. Okay, there were some people that I actually knew to identify by name. But most of them were saying, oh, we heard this or that, right? They're reflecting. But, the anger that you saw across the wherever it was, it's not even clear who exactly what part of it is genuine or not. Now, I'm not saying it's not genuine. All I'm saying is, like, as someone in, designing the protocol and thinking about this, you actually don't quite know what to do with it, right? Are these real people? How many of them are? Okay. Now, at the time, of course, it was a very unpleasant feeling. With time, two things happened. First of all, it subsided, just, people moved on. Yeah. But even more importantly, we noticed that pretty much every airdrop that came after us, and many of them followed in our footsteps in terms of, the number of tokens allocated, whole bunch of things, they got pretty much the same amount of shit, pretty much the same playbook. And that made us feel, a little bit better. So it's still this unresolved problem. Like, if you need to do it PG tomorrow, I don't know how exactly you do it in a very good way. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Hyperliquid have found it, and I mean, good for them and good for everyone, because now everyone can follow whatever that playbook is. Yeah, great. Yeah.
I think my perspective on Hyperliquid is that they, first of all, the founder of Hyperliquid basically took the stance at the beginning that we're going to build this without any VC, without any outside investment. They also, this is a good point I heard brought up, I think recently by Tarun, or somebody on the chopping block. And it was, look, when you build a very purpose-built chain, right? They're now becoming their own L1. But when you have a very specific purpose-built chain, it is a perp DEX. It's much easier to reward very specific behavior, which is, are you trading perps every single day? Are you 10x leveraging? Are you know what I mean? Are you using these vaults? And so I think there is a lot of legitimacy to that, in the sense that, look, you can, people are paying fees and they're doing legitimate trades. It makes it does make it much easier. So I don't, I understand that a sort of generic chain may, and like you said, you're right. Like, a large portion of these people are airdrop farmers. There are institutional sized airdrop farming operations. Like, we both know about this, right? I think that one of, like, sorry to bring this back up, but it was just so funny to me. One of the guys on your team called somebody an e-bagger, and I'm sitting here and I'm like, it's not it's not like the nicest thing to say, but he's also right. And so I'm kind of conflicted myself when I'm like, yeah, I mean, I think these people are kind of e-beggars. Now, does that mean you should say that? Probably not. But I think that did kind of fuel the flames to some extent. You probably saw this. Obviously, me sitting on the sidelines heckling, I thought it was kind of hilarious. But I understand, like, from
the inside, it didn't feel hilarious. It felt very,
I can
very
see
painful.
I can see it not being hilarious. I still think, yeah. So, well.
Just to clarify, I mean, what happened, and I'm not blaming anyone who, like, in his anger took this thing. This was something that happened several months before, but the internet forgets nothing, and for which he apologized and everything was passed. But of course, in the anger, this thing was pulled out, and then everything sort of focused on it. There were a bunch of things that the anger focused on. Yeah, I mean, but you know what? Even when it was unfolding and we felt very unpleasant with just the general, as one of us said, we're distributing a whole bunch of things that may be valuable to a lot of people, and what we're getting is just a whole bunch of hatred for doing that, right? I will say that it was very clear to us that this is, in economic terms, this is by definition a shock, right? An economic shock, and it's one of these things where you need it to settle. And then you need to just move on and see where the long-term, value and building is. I also want to just comment on one other thing. I know everyone just loves to pick on VCs. It's very simple. Like, without VC investment, we could not have a 200-person team working and bringing Starks to the world. And there would be, it's not like a perps thing, right? To build Starks, you need, like, and to show that it works, not just I've done math papers and I've even built academic code with, like, grants from research institutions to the tune of, let's say, $1 to $2 million. It still is like, you need, like, I don't know, like $20 to $50 million to pay salaries for engineers. And it's not a perps that you can, so there, you don't want VC money, fine, but you won't have things like ZK rollups. Period. They won't appear.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, and I also think, just going back to the airdrop thing for 1 second. I mean, it's even the people who aren't these, like, large scale airdrop farming operations. it's very difficult to determine, whether or not these people have any desire to use Starknet in the future, if they have any desire to contribute in some capacity to the community. So, and yes, you're spot on. Every single airdrop since then has gotten an equal amount. But there is one. So actually, let me ask you one other thing. Is there anything, when we can move on from this, is there anything you would have done differently in retrospect?
Not exactly sure. There was one thing like with this little cap of like 0.05 something ether that you had, that which was like $10 at a certain date. Yeah. Certainly should have done some other thing that. But I think the amount of hatred would probably have stayed the same. And why am I saying this? You look at things like airdrops that came after, and of course didn't have that thing. They got pretty much the same amount of hatred, or because the essence of it is, let's put it this way. There is a rational incentive. If you're in the business of airdrop farming, you have a rational incentive to scream and blast at whatever team is doing about the things that you hope that maybe they will correct and you'll get more of. And if not them, the other teams watching will say, oh, we're going to do that, so they won't scream at us. So there is zero chance. Like, you gain nothing from not shouting and complaining, especially anonymously. And the more uproar that you create, it costs you almost nothing, and you can only win from it. So I see pretty much zero probability that we would have pulled off something like that without a huge major uproar. And the fact that we were first and there was so much attention, I think rightly so, because I think Starknet really stands apart. We're very, very unique, right? Non-EVM tech that we pretty much innovated and built ourselves from the scratch and like really vetted. And so there was a lot of attention and a lot of anticipation. I don't think we could have gotten away with anything, with anything less in terms of like hatred and anger, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable, perspective now, having had some time to look back on it. Let me ask you about Stark, the token. Do you think how do you feel? So I think you said you're in the process of making it the gas token. There's been some interesting discussions recently. I've kind of fueled the flames a little bit on this too, about, whether these L2s will, there's all this ETH alignment now, but in the future, will they want to use their own gas tokens? And if even if not, where does the value accrue? It certainly, there's a lot of reservations as to whether or not this is really accruing back to Ethereum. We can see this with Base right now. I'll tell you, I think it's pretty apparent that Base wants to push USDC. I don't think anybody would really push back on that. Why
do you think that?
No, I mean, it
and there's no connection, right?
Well, so I'm interested. Yeah, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on using Stark as the gas token, and then also kind of just the overarching view on this going forward with other rollup teams and kind of where this goes in the future.
Yeah, so we did a lot of work on tokenomics and thinking about the token design and its utility, and I have very clear thoughts on this. And okay, what is it? What is it all about, right? We want decentralization, which means that we want the system to be operated by parties that will have the best interests of Starknet in its. So, okay, now how are we now? One issue that we've tried to solve for, and it goes like this: whatever is the initial distribution, even if you got it perfectly right, at t equals 0, you have a set of players. Time goes by, and now you have a whole new bunch of players and you have some newcomers, and they're driving tremendous value to the network because they're doing like work that and just innovation that didn't exist previously. The question is, how do they get a say at the table? How do they become an important part of the ecosystem? And okay, so you say, I'm going to have a token, so I need them to get parts of the token. How do I make sure that they get part of the token? And how do I do so in a way that is sort of automatic? So our answer, called Devonomics, which we've already initiated and done one round of, and we plan to lean in a lot more, goes like this. Suppose you came in, you wrote some application that is doing like 90% of the volume or value or whatever going on Starknet is your application. You built it today. So what's going to happen, or what is happening, a portion of fees will be automatically sent towards your address, right? Or to the token holders of your project. And this way they get to sit by the table. Now, this makes sense only if it's the same token in which the fees are paid, in which you do staking, in which you operate the system, right? If you take Ether or Bitcoin or something like that, it doesn't work. So that for us was the reasoning. So you take your token, you make it the fee token, you make it the staking token, and you make sure that you have a devonomics program that basically will siphon a part of the fees and of the new minting to teams that are driving value to the network.
Okay, so like let's take the perspective of Bitcoiner right now. Let's say you get a functioning Starknet Bitcoin L2. Yeah. How do you sell Bitcoiners on using Stark as the gas token now, as opposed to Stark being the value accrual mechanism? So like I may want to invest in Stark, hold Stark, because I think it will generate a number of fees, but I may not necessarily want to use it as the gas token, or, like I may not want to, bridge and have to buy Stark. So how do you sell, a Bitcoiner on this, for example?
Okay, one thing is, Starknet, among the many innovations that we did, being non-EVM and not tied by the original design choices, Starknet is already 100% native account abstraction, meaning there's no DOAs. Okay, yep. So as a consequence of this, there's several nice things. First of all, like the UX on Starknet wallets and apps is just a level apart from anything else. And I urge users to try out, wallets like Bravos and Argent. You will not believe the level of UX and the ability to transact securely without your 24-word passphrases and all of that. It's amazing. Okay. In addition to that, there's already Paymaster already on Starknet, done seamlessly and used all over there. So one answer to Bitcoiners is, hey, you can pay. You don't need to even to know that there are any of these tokens. You're going to pay in Bitcoin. That's fine. Okay. Yeah. That's answer number one. I think that's a good enough answer for a lot of them. So you'll never need to hold any Stark, and you can pay everything in Bitcoin through a Paymaster.
Yeah. But no, it's abstracted away. And I think that's like, we're already seeing this, like I said, occur with Base. You can already functionally only know about USDC and use Base. So I think that this is generally the trajectory that everybody
right. It's just done much better and safer and more efficiently on something like Starknet with its look. Base has this amazing advantage of like the biggest distribution channel in the US. Yeah, for sure. But in terms of head-to-head security, safety, path to decentralization, Starknet just wins overall. Check it out, and you'll see for yourself.
Do you have thoughts on based rollups?
I don't think they're going to work. Doesn't make any sense. Like it's not. I'll tell you why. Like in the end, like if you can scale the sequencers of Ethereum 10x, then just do that. But you don't need a based rollup. Now, this whole thing of like Starknet right now can operate at 250 TPS on an ongoing basis. In a month or so, we're 4xing that, thanks to the work of Lambda class with native Cairo. And we're not going to stop there. So now let's suppose that you have a whole bunch of rollups running at 1,000 TPS each. So what is it? Like an Ethereum can run at whatever, 10 or 30 TPS. So you have 10 of those, and we're not going to stop there. We're going to reach 10,000 and 100,000 TPS within a couple of years. What exactly does it mean to have this base rollup where all of this goes through it? It makes no sense to me. Now, if you have a way to sequence 10 or 100K transactions across these different rollups, then don't have the rollups. Just call it Ethereum, scale, fucking Ethereum to 100x that, and be done with it. So not to mention that you need to coordinate all of these different L2s and so on. And, we're not going to move away from Cairo just because it's way more efficient and secure and safe and, a more pleasant language to build in. So now I'd be very happy if a lot of rollups choose Cairo, but what if they don't? How exactly are you going to just work across these very different VMs and so on? So I don't think based rollups are going to happen.
Yeah, I think a lot of people share your.
Look, I'll say this: there's a long line of very far-fetched research that Ethereum has been, talking about and has led nowhere in the past. Like literally zero, has led nowhere. So you have to have sort of a grain of salt, like when hearing the very next thing that is touted as this is going to be the big thing, because I've heard so many of them over the past years that have led nowhere. And I don't see the sense in based rollups. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I think a lot of people share your thoughts. Okay, I want to ask you, not to put you too much on the spot here, and you can say what you want or just kind of be politically correct and divert where you want. But like speaking of something like base, let's say Starknet is much more secure and much more decentralized. What are your thoughts on base capturing a tremendous amount of market share? Do you have thoughts on maybe people just not caring? And does that concern you? And like you said, the distribution mechanism, right? Maybe I'll get Jesse on here and grill him. But I'm interested, like what, as another roll-up team, and maybe in your mind, you're doing it the right way, right? And then you look at some other roll-ups that maybe not to be too critical, but are making compromises in some areas and have no intention to, become truly decentralized. Like what are your thoughts on that as somebody who's maybe in your mind trying to build it the right way, like I said?
The nice thing about trying, about like having a certain vision and, and principles is that I will live perfectly comfortably in a world where, okay, you know what? Here's what I said day one to our very first employees, and I say it today, and I believe it 100%. Goes like this. I have 100% conviction that our technology is going to conquer the world. And I think this is playing out. Starks, Fry, post-quantum secure, small fields, everything we're doing, things like Stu, I have no doubt. And I think now we're, 7 years after launching Starkware and like something like 8-9 years after the math breakthroughs, this is already starting to become the standard, even if it's not recognized that, we said it first. But that's fine. That's assumption number one. Assumption number two is I am not sure. I said this day one. I'm saying it now. I'm not sure Starkware will be the one maximally monetizing this technology, right? I didn't know it day one, and I'm not sure of it now. The world is just, full of examples where the team that invented everything and so on didn't monetize it. Okay. Number three, what I say is the most important thing in our lives, in my life, is not how much money I make. It is the scarce resource is not money. The scarce resource is the fruitful years that we have here on earth to do something. And in this respect, I have no doubt that people working Starkware are maximizing the function of, not wasting their time and doing things that are extremely meaningful. Now, back to the question is, will this succeed or not? Does this decentralization really matter? So I am very well aware that it may all be like when we look 10 years into the future, 10 years out, when you have me again on this thing, and we look back and we talk about blockchain, maybe it's all about just new financial rails for the existing world that is very centralized. So maybe the only thing that happened was that, right, there's no more Swift. It's now Ripple based, right? And the biggest benefactor of that is Base or Coinbase, that has become the de facto what's called DTCC or something, and it's based on either Ripple or the EVM or something, or maybe even Kyra or something else. Maybe. So it could be. The world has certainly been operating for a very long time with centralized institutions. So maybe that's the steady state. Okay. I will say this: if the end game is that centralized teams are just replacing their rails, then there's no need for Starks or any other ZK proof. No need, because you get integrity by other ways, right? You're going to just trust Jesse and Brian, I can sue them in the American legal system. So, and I am very content and happy going about my route of actually believing that decentralization matters, and that things like proving your integrity in a decentralized world will have value. But I understand that this is a bet and we may fail. I will say this: there are enough very important and very powerful players within crypto and outside that actually do align with this message. And we talk to a lot of them. So I think we also see support, maybe not from the centralized exchanges per se, but from a lot of very powerful players that align with us, and that's what's important.
Yeah, and that is encouraging to hear for what it's worth. Okay, I want to pivot back just now at the end. I want to talk a little bit more about Bitcoin. Is OP-Cat absolutely necessary for ZK rollups? Or, I think there's been this isn't a real bit, but this isn't a real proposal, but like OP-ZK verify or something like this. So is OP-Cat absolutely necessary for what you're trying to do? Or are there other workarounds? Like, what is your strategy here, maybe?
Okay, there are certainly other workarounds. Certainly, if you have more opcodes or opcodes that are more dedicated to Stark verification, sure, that would be better. I'm relying on other, brilliant people who know this space better. People like both within our team, Aviu, or brilliant CPO, and a very strong Bitcoin researcher. Or his co-authors on the recent, let's say, Collider script white paper.
Yeah, I saw that.
How you get covenants without even OP-Cat at a very high price. So people like Andrew Polstra and Ethan Hillman. And what I understand from those bigger experts is that OP-Cat, from a political point of view, may be the path of least resistance to adopting, allowing things like covenants and Stark verification. So I'm trying to be practical and say, okay, let's go with that.
Yeah, that's. I think that I agree that at least politically, OP-Cat for maybe some type of ZK implementation does seem to be like what. And obviously, Eric and Udi are pushing this hard, right? You know them well, so we'll see what comes about. Now, let me ask you something. Let's say that Bitcoin is unable to come to any type of consensus. Are you still optimistic about any other workarounds or some, let me ask you, there's going to be a number of L2s launching here, Bitcoin L2s launching here, some of them that intend to kind of be ZK or, have some inkling of ZK, like Alpin and Citrea. These guys are working on, ZK rollup specifically, but they're going to launch as, some type of trusted federation, or, depending on how BitVM comes along, it can be very trust minimized, but practically speaking, these aren't going to be proper ZK rollups, right? Are you still encouraged, maybe if Bitcoin can't come to consensus on anything, are you still optimistic about the potential for kind of very trust minimized rollups or something like that?
Yeah, yes. You can have things that are not as good. You can have atomic swap based things. You can have all kinds of ways to do some kinds of things. And certainly we're definitely working very hard to welcome such projects also on Starknet. And please, reach out, talk to us. There are a number of teams already planning to deploy that we'll announce in the near future. I hope, certainly there'll be some demand for it. Look, if we're in a world where there's so much activity going on things like Binance and Coinbase, which are fully centralized, including Bitcoin trading, then, by sort of deduction, of course, there's going to be demand also for things that require somewhat less trust than that, but let's say more trust in something that's fully self-custodial. So yes, I think there will be demand. And again, we're at Starknet, we're making plans on trying to offer capacity to this demand and make Starknet a home for these developers. Of course, our hope is that with OP-Cat, you can then segue and boost the security of these systems to be like fully self-custodial.
Okay, I want to ask you one last question. You can go kind of any direction you want with this. Let's say that there's a Bitcoiner who has observed for the past, 5 years or so, the Ethereum rollup centric roadmap, and has said, I don't know if it's working over there. For maybe they're not paying attention too closely. Maybe they don't have a great idea as to what's going on. But let's just say that the vibe they get is, I don't know if that whole rollup centric roadmap is working over there. How do you sell a Bitcoiner in your mind? Not actually sell, but you know what I mean. How would you put forth the importance of something like ZK rollups on Bitcoin to a Bitcoiner who's like, I don't know?
I would ask that Bitcoiner, what is it that Bitcoin, in 20 years out, do you think signifies? So if your answer is, it should be digital gold, like this really secure asset that no one ever messes with. But then by definition, like most of humanity won't really be using it, right? Because
yep, exactly.
So that's fine. Yeah, then definitely don't support anything. But if you partake with Satoshi's white paper vision, which talked about micro payments, right? That was the biggest theme there was we need to get micro payments, and you can't get micro payments because in the traditional system everything is manual, and costs are so high that you won't have micro payments. Well, let's automate it. Okay, so if you wanted to stay true to Satoshi's white paper, what are you going to do about it? And I think you need to have, let's say, massive scaling for Bitcoin payments, right? And the safest way, the one that is truest to Satoshi's vision, and by the way, I think there even Zuko, right, who was another, the first CEO of Zcash and a co-founder of mine on Zcash, right? I think he pointed me to a bunch of discussions that I believe he had when Satoshi was still talking about that involved things like ZK, and Satoshi was pro these things. Of course, at that time, Starks weren't around, and this didn't seem practical. But I have no doubt that if Satoshi is out there and wants to, if Satoshi would be willing to communicate again, I'm 100% convinced that he supports, especially something like ZK Starks that have, post-quantum security, no trusted setup, basically safest math assumptions. And the reason is because it just is needed to fulfill his vision. I don't know of any other way that is better to get it. And remember, Satoshi actually introduced a whole bunch of opcodes, including opcat and opmul and a whole bunch of things that if they were around, we could have had, Starks verified. We would have deployed originally on Bitcoin if that thing happened. And the only reason he turned them off was because, there were some attacks back then. But the way I would think about it is, okay, let's make sure that those attacks can happen. It wasn't for ideological reasons that he didn't want covenants. No, there were concrete DOS attacks that he wanted to prevent, and he took them out. So let's make sure that those DOS attacks don't appear, and let's stay true to Satoshi's vision of making this thing a global system. That's what I would try to convince that person.
Okay, that was pretty inspiring. That's a great place to end. I think you really, if Satoshi is listening, hopefully he agrees.
Hi, Satoshi.
I think that'll sell some people. I can tell you that. So, thank you so much for coming on. I thought we had a great conversation. I appreciate you answering a bunch of annoying out of order questions, but that's kind of how I do it. So, I do appreciate it. I thought it was really good.
Thank you, Gwart, for having probably the very best podcast out there in crypto.
Well, that means a lot. Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks.